Are you ready to listen to my dad Joe and Uncle Justin talk about sports? Now on with the show!
The Joe Mays and J-Raff Show is brought to you by Mays Sandwich Shop, which have been serving the greater West Lawn area delicious food for over 70 years. You are listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show.
Boring.
A weekly podcast about sports since 2011.
Don't you ever get tired of being wrong all the time?
With a focus on football.
Second and goal. Pass. Got it. Touchdown. This guy has had some year.
Al, I've got to tell you, in a pressure situation, I don't know if I have ever seen anybody be better than Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp. Wow, what a drive.
4th and 1. Burrow trying to keep it going, gets spun down, gets it away, and incomplete. Rams now running down to celebrate with a defensive play.
And guess who?
Of course.
I mean, you don't even have to think about it.
Pointing to the ring finger.
When everything was on the line for the Rams, yes, we know it was Aaron Donald.
But the Rams were built to win the Super Bowl, and they have sealed the deal.
Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and Justin Raffoff. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. I am your host, Joe Mays, and here with me digitally this week is my co-host, Justin Raffoff.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Man, doesn't feel like football weather, but maybe heat acclimatization weather, but didn't feel like football weather this weekend, but we're always ready to talk football.
Yeah, it's the training camp weather or climate right now, at least here in South Central, Southeastern Pennsylvania, where I am back. It feels more like Florida here now than it did when I was in Florida, and that is why we missed the past 2 Sunday nights. It's been 3 weeks since our last show on May 1st, but we are ready to get back into things before we take another 2-week hiatus. So we're super dependable here at the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. You can count on us to broadcast at least once a month. That's generally our goal, once a month. No, we're usually pretty good about it, but things this late spring and early summer, there's a lot going on, and, sometimes we just got to take a break. It just doesn't fit into the schedule. But Justin and I are here tonight, and because we know things are going to be hectic over the next few months, we are starting our NFL preview right now, right this second. This is part 1, and I know we flip-flop, each year is a little bit different because of the cramped schedule. We are going to talk 2 divisions per show over the next few months, sprinkle in another Bulldog Hour before that kicks into high gear and is our weekly show starting in August. So we have the rest of May, all of June, and July to do our NFL preview, which was usually at least 4, hopefully 5 shows. But we're going to start out west like we always do, Justin, and talk about the NFC and AFC West. So a lot of good teams to talk about, though, because the West is really taking control. They are home to the defending Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams and a perennial Super Bowl contender in the AFC and the Kansas City Chiefs. But with the moves a lot of these teams made in the offseason, specifically in the AFC, there's a lot of good teams to talk about tonight, and I still don't know the direction that I'm going to go in, so we're going to have to talk this through in depth.
Yeah, and it's hard enough to do it like just in the divisions like we're going to do, let alone, and I'm thinking ahead of in terms of playoff teams and stuff like that. It gets really hard. I know you had sent me someone or some site had made their picks for division winners, and as of now it was the same 8 as last year.
Yes.
Isn't it? Obviously, it's possible. It's just highly unlikely.
Yeah, it's not probable. So, but again, I'm sure I didn't read in depth, and that was from the Draft Network, which is a great one of my favorite NFL draft sites with Draft Tech. But the Draft Network is a full-time staff. Like, they have a bunch of employees working full-time on NFL draft and NFL discussions year-round. So if this was a roundtable thing and it was kind of the collection of a group of people, I could see why it would be like that, because there's some people that would say, hey, I don't think that team's going to be as good, but then a bunch of others did, but then that person differed on someone else. But in the end, they all ended up going with chalk, the same 8 as last year, which
Right.
honestly I don't think has ever happened. So the odds of that happening are not
Right.
high. And the turnover rate we know in the NFL for the playoffs is close to, if not over 50%.
Right. I guess the hard thing, and we find ourselves in this spot too, though, is by the time we get to like the North, or the North Division, sometimes we end up saying like, well, I can't pick this because then I'd have 3 of 3 the same,
Yeah.
and like that's a stupid reason not to pick a team. Like if you think a team's gonna be the best team, pick them. And that's probably what happened when you talk through it. You're like, oh, these teams won, but again, we're not projecting out our Super Bowl here yet. But like you mentioned, lots of good teams. So definitely some contenders out in the West divisions.
Yeah, and in the NFC West, like I mentioned, Rams are the defending Super Bowl champs, and I don't know that there's too many people that think they're going to be a lot worse, as in not playoff worthy worse. It could be hard to duplicate this success. We haven't had a back-to-back Super Bowl winner in nearly 20 years. But I would expect that both of us are going to have the Rams certainly in contention for the playoffs. I don't see them falling off all that much. But we are going to start out in the NFC West, and we're going to do it just a tad different this year. Instead of Justin or I starting with our number 4 team in the West, we're just going to go in order alphanumerically by the mascot name. So out in the NFC West, Justin, we're going to start with the San Francisco 49ers. So a lot going on out in San Francisco, and as usual, it relates to the quarterback situation. Jimmy Garoppolo's still there, but it's Trey Lance's team. Do you think Garoppolo is going to be there when training camp gets underway?
When training camp gets underway, yes. When the season starts, no. I think you're going to see an injury or somebody is not working out. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I forget what the other team was, but I know one of them was Carolina. I think it was Ross Tucker that had sent this out maybe a week or so ago, like basically saying like there's a 0% chance that the opening day like quarterback starter is on the roster for those teams right now. It was Panthers and someone else.
Seattle, maybe?
It could have been. I don't think it was. I feel like it was someone else. I don't remember who, so it could have been. But it's interesting to kind of just to look at some of those. Man, like a team could use Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, man, talk about someone who is divisive, because he's taken his team to the Super Bowl. Well, took his team to the Super Bowl, took his team, into a deep playoff run. Like, yeah, it's crazy. But at the same time, I still feel like, and I'm in this group, like, I don't know. I feel like you got to turn it over to Trey Lance, especially with where you took him.
Right.
And the only thing you can do, like, I understand, and they played him last year, and maybe he wasn't ready, but that was kind of the thing. They weren't sure he was going to be ready. But year 2 now, it's time. You got to play him. Because you got to find out what you have, one way or the other. Kind of like what happened with Jimmy Garoppolo in New England a little bit, different circumstance, but like they needed to know what they were going to have, and they never got a great look long term, and they ended up having to move on, but they got a lot of value because they were at least to be able to see a little bit of what he was able to do. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it'd be interesting because, well, and we've done this a bunch, and we don't need to do it now because I know we're trying to keep on a time with different teams. But if you go through, I don't know where you slot Garoppolo. And like when I say that, I don't mean like I don't even know. Like there's a bunch of teams where I'm like, I think he's better than that guy, but I don't know. I think Garoppolo's like ceiling isn't as high as a lot of guys in the NFL, but I think his floor is maybe a little higher than a lot of guys, except for the injury thing, which again, that might be unfair, but he's had some injuries that have kind of derailed him a little bit.
Sure.
But you got to go with Trey Lance. Like this Niners team, you gotta go with Trey Lance. Interesting thing, nothing ever came of the Deebo Samuel stuff, did it?
No, I was one of the other talking points I wanted to get to because we're still kind of sitting out there waiting to figure out what's happening. I thought there was maybe some cooling there in terms of it not being as dire as it seemed at one point, but there's still a chance that that could flare up again over the summer. There's been a lot of things mentioned about why Debo wants out of there. Is it the system? Is it the location? Is it the personalities? What is it? I don't know that we've gotten a definitive answer to any of that.
Yeah, one of the things that I heard that made sense, doesn't mean it's true, but it, could be part of an equation there, is that, he knows that when they go to Trey Lance, the offense will look different. And if it looks different, that may change his role in that offense going into a contract year, like that. It made sense. I don't know that that's it, but like it makes sense. Especially if, you hear conflicting things, like, cause some people are like, oh, maybe Trey Lance isn't ready. But then George Kittle comes out the other day and says, like, yeah, he needs reps to be more consistent. But like some of the things I've seen from him, I've never seen anyone do. Now, what's he going to do? Throw the guy under the bus? But if you're going on the record,
right?
People all the time are like, oh, well, I want to know what the players think. Well, when they think it, then we're like, I don't know what they think. So,
Garoppolo and Debo's situation obviously are going to have a huge impact on what happens with the 49ers. But by all accounts, this is going to be Trey Lance's team moving forward.
Right.
And I think we both are in agreement that that's what needs to happen because of what they gave up to get Lance and I would say inconsistency and injury history of Garoppolo. But I do agree with you that I think Trey Lance probably has a higher ceiling if he can unlock it. But I also believe he has a much lower floor than what Jimmy G has shown.
I think Trey Lance's ceiling is significantly higher than Jimmy Garoppolo's ceiling.
Right, probably like close to top 5 quarterback.
Yeah,
if he reaches his potential.
Right, and how ridiculous is that? Because we have no idea, but like just it's. People are like, oh, you're just Yes, it's pure speculation. I'm talking about projections. But I think he could be a top,
like 5 to 7. I think,
pushing. Yeah, I was thinking 7, but at times pushing top 5. And if he's that, man, you look at a team that's really good and improving at quarterback play. Ooh, that would be scary. That would make that could add a whole new wrinkle to that division.
Right.
And again, what we see at the beginning of the season might not be what we see by the end of the season. Like if the Niners are a team that's, has their ups and downs early because they make that move to Trey Lance, and there's going to be some hiccups there, but they could certainly be a team at the end where,
right. But I think
want nothing to do with them because Trey Lance is getting a year's worth of experience.
Right. Yeah. Well, they were 10-7 last year. And they weren't healthy or ready to roll at all times, and they were just, minutes away from making it back to the Super Bowl. But if you can unlock Trey Lance, that could be a very dangerous team. But I do think while he's growing and maturing as an NFL player, he's, going to be at best at middle of the pack, and maybe even in his developmental stages, he's a bottom 10 quarterback, like 2022, maybe even 22 to 24, because he hasn't had the time to show us anything. But Garoppolo, to me, I think you could say maybe at his peak, he could get to top 10, like right there, like 9, 10, 11.
At his best, he's at 10, but I'd say
at his worst, I'm saying like 16 or something like that. Like I feel like he's right in there.
I was going to say, I feel like most of the season he sits at 15 to 20, somewhere in there. Like, and so, hey, like if 15 to 20 is tough, and they've got a lot of weapons other places, offense and defense, not everywhere, but maybe they can get something in return for Garoppolo or something that they can use to add in and could maybe open up some cap space. I know it's weird on when you trade guys and all that stuff.
Yeah, I don't like to speculate on that because I don't know enough about how those things
Right.
work. But in terms of adding or removing players, they're basically swapping Garoppolo for Lance, but we already knew that. Their only real big loss is probably offensive lineman Laken Tomlinson, who went to the New York Jets. Raheem Mostert went to my Dolphins, but again, he's had injury issues. DJ Jones went to the Broncos, a defensive lineman. Honestly, I don't know that there were a ton of big impact guys. A lot of backups and special teamers or young guys looking to break out, and maybe that'll happen for Trent Sherfield, Arden Key. Just looking at the names that they've lost, nothing too outlandish. But then they also didn't sign anyone that I think is super exciting, at least to outsiders of the team. Travarius Ward from the Chiefs, the cornerback, Hassan Ridgeway from the Eagles, Ray McLeod from the Steelers. Those are kind of the names that stick out in terms of free agency. Now, in the draft, because of their trades, is primarily the Trey Lance stuff from last year, they didn't have a pick until 61, which was in the second round. They took Drake Jackson, semi-local product from USC, as a pass rusher. I know there were a lot of draft nicks high on him, and they think that he could be an interesting piece to add to that 49ers defense. And then in terms of interest name-wise to college football fans, or specifically us as Penn State fans, the 49ers did take Tariq Castro-Fields in the late 6th round. And then Brock Purdy, the quarterback from Iowa State, snuck in there as their 7th round pick. But the other guys, we talk. If you listen to our draft show, you know that we didn't dive real deep into the draft pool this year. So there's a lot of names in the 49ers draft list that I am not familiar with. Tyrion Davis-Price, the running back from LSU, Danny Gray, the wide receiver from SMU, Spencer Burford, offensive tackle, Samuel Womack, a cornerback, Nick Zakelj from Fordham, a tackle, and Kalia Davis, a defensive tackle from UCF. So in terms of personnel, Justin, honestly, to me, it's like at best a push, it seems. I don't know that they added or subtracted much talent. So you have a team that went 10-7 last year. You're swapping out your quarterback, which is a huge question mark. So then really, to me, it comes down to coaching staff, which I don't think there was a lot of upheaval for the 49ers, and then your scheduled opponents and maybe the location.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, and obviously this was super clear, but it's all going to come down to Trey Lance. Like, schedule, all that stuff. If he develops this year, well, if he shows this year that he's their quarterback of the future, and so kind of the approach that I took, like, last year with the Eagles of being like, what they need is Jalen Hurts to show that he is the quarterback for the next year. Does that make now with it, they moved up to take him in the first round, so he's going to get a couple chances. But Trey Lance needs to show that he is their answer at quarterback, even if he isn't at that answer yet. Does that make sense?
He needs to show the potential that people think he has.
If he does, they're going to be good. If not, then they're a struggle. So basically, once they have first-round picks again, they don't want anyone suggesting maybe they should or could be looking for a quarterback, or anyone second-guessing that Jimmy Garoppolo should still be the quarterback, and they're in the right spot. So, and that's tough because in the NFL, it's win now. I know there's this building idea, but you can look in the division and see the win now mentality. So it's going to be interesting.
So I'm just glancing at their schedule here, and I know we want to move on to the Cardinals, but a couple things that stand out. The 49ers are playing a road game in Mexico City on November 21st, and that is a divisional game against the Arizona Cardinals. They are done playing the rival Los Angeles Rams.
That bumped the Eagles out of that game. So Eagles were scheduled to have to play that game.
Oh, well, there you go. Don't have to do that. The Rams series with the 49ers is over before Halloween. So the Rams and 49ers play October 3rd and October 30th. So those games will not matter at the end of the year. So those all have been decided early.
See, that's one I feel like that would be a good Thanksgiving night game. That third
Right.
game on Thanksgiving.
Right. I agree. And the 49ers have the potential to show us what they're made of early because they open with what you would think at this point would be winnable games at Chicago and against Seattle. Both teams still haven't shown too much, and I don't want to say that either of them are going to be the worst team in the league, but I don't think a lot of people expect a ton from Chicago and Seattle at this point. But then they got a big game at Denver, and I know a lot of people are high on the Broncos, and we'll get to them in a little bit, before hosting the Rams and then going to Carolina and Atlanta, both teams that you would think San Francisco should be able to beat. But again, West Coast team going east, and those games are early. So it's going to be interesting for the 49ers to begin with, because after those two games, they have the Chiefs and Rams back to back. So if the 49ers are going to be good, we should know pretty early. If they're winning the games that we think they'll win, but lose to these other big teams, they're probably a 500 team, maybe a little bit better. If they're not beating the Rams, Chiefs, and Broncos, it could be a rough year for them. They may not show. But, of course, last year they started off really slow and came on at the end. So maybe they'll be a second-half team again this year. But anything else to say about the 49ers before we talk Cardinals?
No, I think we're good right now.
All right, we'll come back again to our rankings as soon as we finish all of the NFC West teams. So Arizona is an interesting one. They were on fire to start last season. I believe they started, was it 9-0? Were they 9-0 at one point last year? Or no, 7-0. 7-0. They lost to the Packers 21-24 to drop to 7-1. So they started 7-0, but they finished 11-6. So they were 4-6 over their last 10, and we know that they lost in the playoffs as well. And there's been a lot of question marks about a variety of things, both the future of their head coach, Cliff Kingsbury, as well as quarterback Kyler Murray. At one point, Kyler Murray this offseason got rid of all the things relating him to the Arizona Cardinals. People were talking again about him in baseball, and there's just a really weird situation. What I know last year on this show, we were like, oh, watch out for the Cardinals, and we looked kind of brilliant at the beginning, but then they came back down to earth the second half of the season. Where are you with the Cardinals right now and the whole Kyler Murray saga, and what do you think we'll see from them this season?
Okay, fool me once 2 years ago. Well, not 2 years ago.
In 2021.
Actually, yeah, it was 2 years ago. But that was tough because we were in that 2020 season was just crazy. Okay. So this year I'm all in. I'm like, they're better. They're going to be even better. All this stuff. They start out first half of the season, look amazing, and then they collapse. And I want to just kind of go to this, right? I think Cliff Kingsbury is not the answer, in my opinion. I know that's crazy because the offense, when clicking, looks great. But going back to 2013, and I know this was in college, right? Texas Tech lost its last 5 games of the regular season, all right? And then won Cliff Kingsbury's only bowl game that year after playing themselves into a bad bowl game. In 2014, Texas Tech lost 4 out of its last 5, including the bowl game. 2015, 4 out of its last 6, including the bowl game. In 2016, they lost 3 of their last 4. In 2017, 6 of their last 8. And in 2018, they went on a 5-game losing streak to end. He was fired and then was hired in the NFL. Right? So, it's just, I don't know. It's one of those things where it just doesn't make a lot of sense as to why, we're closing in on a decade. Now, okay, he inherited a bad team. All right, so that made sense, that they were bad his first year in the NFL. But then after that, they've had a couple straight seasons of bad, second half of the seasons in the NFL. So basically, the only time in the last 10 seasons that Cliff Kingsbury's teams haven't underperformed the last 1, 2 to 3 months of the season is the season they were just bad the whole season. That is awful. That is awful. And and there's lots of problems. You can blame it on Kyler not being able to stay healthy the whole season. Okay, well, you're probably the smallest quarterback in the league. Maybe there's a trend there. And is that unfair? Possibly. But like, it happened 2 years ago. It happened this year. Like,
Right there.
when are we going to see a full season? And the thing is, when you get nicked up and you're a guy who is so fast, and when he's running, he is as fast as any of those guys. He's unreal. But like, I don't know. I feel like until we do this sometimes with teams on the other end, where look, I'm not picking against them until they prove me wrong.
Yeah,
See
primarily New England.
Right, New England, the Packers. I know I went against them last year, but like so many times until I see or the Packers in the playoffs,
I was going to
like
say, yeah,
until you prove me wrong, like right, like either way there. But with the Cardinals, I'm kind of like until you show me different, I'm over this. I don't believe they have. I don't know. They're a talented roster. I think there's some holes on that roster. And I think the coaching doesn't do anything to hide or get better and, or improve so that those holes aren't there. I think Kingsbury's kind of been exposed in the NFL a little bit here.
Right.
And
That's what so you and I talk about it a lot. Changing of coaching staffs will sometimes give teams bump, and then or we'll get like a hot rookie will come in and do well at the beginning of the year, and then do they or do they not get figured out in the second half, or is they're in their sophomore year, in their second year in the league? And I feel like both Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury have been figured out by the NFL, and it's how do they react? How do they change their game or the game plan? And I think we saw last year that they're unable to do that for whatever reason it is, whether it's whether it's injury with Kyler Murray or other players on that team, or whether it's just stubbornness. And this is the way I do things, they're going to work. And maybe that's part of the later season collapses under Kingsbury's control. But they haven't, like you said, they haven't shown us anything to change my mind. And I feel like I've done a complete 180 from a year ago when we were kind of like, watch out for the Cardinals. I think they could be something. And then immediately, once they reach the halfway point, things unraveled.
And throw in DeAndre Hopkins. Missed the second half of last year. He's going to miss the first half of this year. And again,
there's a lot of adversity for them to overcome.
I don't have anything against DeAndre Hopkins. But at the same time, I'm like, well, he kind of got a lot of benefit of the doubt because of the way the Houston thing went down. And I understand that. But at the same time, like, you've lost. And again, moral high ground may not be the right term here. It may be like more of a benefit of the doubt kind of thing. But like, man, we see it all the time. When receivers drop off, they drop off quick. Maybe not as quick as running backs do, but when they drop off, they drop
it does
off quick.
happen, yeah.
And he was injured and unable to produce. He wasn't putting up huge numbers the first half of last year anyway, even when the team was doing great. And then he got hurt. And then, I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
So,
but I'm until they prove me otherwise, I'm down on the Cardinals.
Yeah, the Cardinals added Trey McBride in the draft. That was probably their biggest acquisition. They didn't have a first-round pick. Trey McBride is a tight end. They had already re-signed our boy Zach Ertz to or re-signed him. I think it was a 3-year deal.
Yeah, good for him.
Good for him. But it was just weird that they also have Max Williams on the roster and a variety of other tight ends, and then they drafted Trey McBride with their first pick when there were other issues out there. You talked about the DeAndre Hopkins suspension. They have, late stages AJ Green still. Andy Isabella has shown some flashes here and there. Rondale Moore was an early round pick a year ago, so he's looking to break out in year 2. But then they traded for Marquise Brown from the Ravens in the draft. And, I don't know, could that have been just to make Kyler feel a little bit better? Because Marquise Brown, I feel like, is a super boom or bust wide receiver. I don't think he's a number one like he thinks he is. And, of course, I think the Ravens came out on top with what they were able to get from Arizona for Brown.
I sent you that other thing where, like, it was something crazy. I don't know if he was, like, the most targeted like wide receiver last year, something crazy.
Yeah, you sent it
And
to me. Yeah, just see if I can pull it up.
or no. I think he was 10th overall and 9th among wide receivers in targets last year. So he's getting targeted all the time in Baltimore. But it wasn't good enough.
Yeah, here it was.
He's won it out for years apparently. Like,
Hollywood Brown was 10th in the league in targets last year,
yeah.
and he felt like he wasn't getting enough.
Right. Now he was second on his team because Mark Andrews was 9th on that list, I believe.
Oh.
But was the only tight end above him, I think.
Right.
Like, they're all wide receivers. But man, and you had a backup quarterback for the last third of the season there.
Right.
So you got to be careful what you ask for there. I mean, yeah, it's going to be more of the system, but this could easily, to me, be one of those where maybe he does put up some big numbers, but I think the team's going to be worse. Like,
yeah,
or I should say, could be worse because AFC North is no joke either. But
it's funny though. This is also one of those teams that I feel like could come around and bite us, and they could end up being really good. Like, I think there's potential there. I think because I don't think those first 7 weeks was a fluke. I just feel like something happened. And maybe, like I alluded to already, maybe the NFL, the coaches and coordinators figured them out. And maybe it will be bad this year if there's no change in the system or the way they utilize the players. But I'm with you. I'm down on the Cardinals from where I was a year ago. So let's go.
I think, right. Just real quick, the problem for me is even when we're at Halloween, we still won't know because like the problem is November and December and January. Like, so we won't know till Christmas what this team actually is.
Yeah, and this is probably not great for Cliff Kingsbury because their bye is super late. So they could say adios to him after Thanksgiving, right as we enter December, if things are not going well. Super easy start to the season. Chiefs, Raiders, Rams. So, Chiefs, Raiders, Rams, then Panthers, Eagles, Seahawks, Saints, Vikings, Seahawks, Rams, 49ers, Chargers. They've got a few 3-game sets in there that are tough. Oh, and then after their bye week, they have Patriots, Broncos, Bucks. So, I think just looking at the schedule reinforces to me that I'm not high on the Cardinals. I don't think there's any way they get to double-digit wins. But I don't want to jump too far ahead because we want to talk about the Rams and Seahawks before we get into numbers. So the Los Angeles Rams are the defending Super Bowl champions. We were 12-5 last year, won the division, had 3 All-Pros. Everyone was back on the Sean McVay bandwagon. They beat up on the aforementioned Cardinals 34-11 in the wild card. And then we're able to hold on for dear life to beat the Buccaneers 30-27 before squeaking out an NFC championship against the 49ers, the first team we talked about tonight, and then able to entertain us in the Super Bowl with a victory over Joe Burrow and the Bengals 23-20. Absolutely amazing seasons from Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald, and a season that I think a lot of people around the league wanted for Matthew Stafford because I feel like he's a guy that everyone felt sorry for being in Detroit for so long and always seemed like a likable guy, and he was able to get his ring, and the Rams are NFL champs for the first time in 20 some years. So, but what does it mean in 2022? Does any of that matter in 2022? Will Father Time catch up to Matthew Stafford? Will we start to see his prowess disintegrate? In terms of personnel, they may have lost some things, but they added some things too. The Rams just are another one of those teams that they do not care about the salary cap. They'll figure it out. And as General Manager Les Snead said, F them picks, right? He doesn't care. He just wants some talented players. And he's done a great job of accumulating a lot of good football players. Because of all the trades, they didn't have a lot of draft picks, and not many of their picks stand out to me as being instant impact guys. Of course, they could be at positions that don't get a lot of press, like offensive line. That was their first pick, Logan Bruss, the guard from Wisconsin. But yeah, they're back I feel like you probably would say that they're the favorite. I don't think that there's been enough changes or issues with them in the offseason to knock them off that pedestal. Stafford's back. They have Cam Akers now, who's fully recovered from his injury. I know we saw him at the end of last year and in the playoffs. They still have Darrell Henderson. The wide receiver position, you thought, oh man, Odell Beckham tore his knee and he's still out there, and they're losing him. And they got rid of Robert Woods, but Cooper Kupp's still there. Van Jefferson showed flashes. So did Tutu Atwell. Oh, and then they signed our boy Allen Robinson. They brought Allen Robinson in.
I think Allen Robinson has a monster year.
I think he could as well. So I'm excited for that. I don't have anything against the Rams. Not that I like Los Angeles teams, but I want Allen Robinson to do well because I think he's been in crappy situations, which he chose to go to in Chicago. He didn't have any choice being drafted by Jacksonville, but he's had a couple great seasons at both places, but had some very bad luck with injuries or poor quarterback play. And now that he's with Stafford and with Sean McVay and that Rams offense, I think Allen Robinson could have a big, big year.
I agree.
So elsewhere, we know that Whitworth, I want to say Whitford for some reason. Andrew Whitworth retired, so they're going through some offensive line changes. But when you have Aaron Donald and the pieces around him, you got to think that they also signed Bobby Wagner, who I know isn't the Bobby Wagner of like 7 years ago or anything.
They don't need him to be.
They don't need him to be. I mean, they won the Super Bowl with a quasi Penn State I think undrafted or 7th round draft pick, being the leader of their defense last year, and they just let him walk. Because they're the Rams. It doesn't matter. They'll figure it out. They'll find someone else. And they Jalen Ramsey's still there. A couple other Penn Staters there, and Grant Haley and Nick Scott. So a lot of interest from us here at the Joe Mays and J-Raff show for them. But I just don't think what they've lost, they've at a minimum replaced, and it's a push. Yeah. And I know it'll come down to the health of the players and then the schedule and their opponents of what happens with the Rams this year. And they will certainly be under the microscope. They will kick off the season against the Bills. I think these are two Super Bowl favorites getting to the start of the year on NBC on September 8th. And they also will play the AFC West. So the two West divisions, maybe the two best divisions in football, are playing each other this year. So a lot of good games, but they have a chance. Oh yeah. I'm really excited for it. The Battle of Los Angeles takes place on New Year's Day. Rams Chargers, January 1st. That's cool. So that'll be fun. But yeah, what do you have to say about the Rams? What do you think about them this year?
Yeah, I was happy for Stafford last year. I don't really know why. He's another perfect example, one of those guys that I couldn't stand, like coming out of college, coming out of Georgia, and you're like, oh my gosh, what the heck? But I feel like he earned it being in Detroit that long. Like he earned, the positives that he got to go through last year. The only concern I would have is like, you look at, everyone thought last year, like, oh, the Bucs they brought every starter back. They're running it back. It's going to be so easy for them. And I mean, they were close. Like if they beat the Rams, I don't know who's not taking them over the Niners. You know what I mean? In that NFC Championship game. And then how do you go against them in the Super Bowl? But like, I feel like, yes, on paper, like the Rams, they replaced any losses they really had, and they go through and do a lot of stuff, but it's so hard. It's so hard because it's not just being like good, it's also getting lucky, and the luck part you don't really control, and so you have one thing go wrong here or an injury there or whatever, and that can just change your whole season, and that can sometimes happen at the end of the year. Sometimes happen at the beginning of the year, and it looks worse than it was because the season got derailed in September, But on paper, you look at it, and I don't know how they would I don't know how you go against them. Like, at least, but at the same time, some of it comes down to those things that you never know how it's going to play out. So we'll have to see.
All right, and then last and possibly least in terms of NFC West, the Seattle Seahawks. Not used to saying that about them, although things haven't been so great over the last 5 years as they were in the 5 before that. They were 7-10 last year, finished fourth, and didn't qualify for the playoffs. They have gone over a pretty big upheaval in terms of roster. They are struggling, to say the least. Right now, their quarterback will be one of Jacob Eason, Drew Lock, or Geno Smith after they traded Russell Wilson to the Broncos. I think people right now are thinking it'll be Geno Smith because he's been there for a few years and he knows the system and he got to play when Russell Wilson was injured. Drew Lock came over in the Russell Wilson trade, and Jacob Eason I think he'll be entering his third year in the league this year. He was drafted by the Colts in 2020. So this will be his third year in the NFL. But I think he's a long shot to start for Seattle. So it comes down probably Drew Lock and Geno Smith, unless they would somehow acquire Garoppolo from the 49ers, which I feel is unlikely, or maybe Baker Mayfield from Cleveland. But again, I don't know if Baker Mayfield makes this team that much better. I don't think they're great. They like to run the ball, and yet they haven't been able to develop an offensive line that can do it, and they haven't found a running back that can stay healthy.
Yeah. Usually teams that like to run the ball they like to run it because they're good at it, and that's not Seattle.
No, they lost their identity.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like when they lost to the Patriots in that Super Bowl, things went downhill fast.
Yeah, and when teams like to run the ball, they're usually like, "Hey, let's invest in our offensive line," and that's the opposite of what they've done. Like,
right
man,
now, they did spend a first-round pick on Charles Cross, who I believe is known more for his pass blocking than his run blocking. So,
which is something they could have done any of the last 5 years to help out the guy they ran out of town.
Right. So
run out of town. That's flipping it around a little bit. But the guy they
didn't strive to keep. Right.
Right.
So, I mean, they have Chris Carson, DJ Dallas, Rashad Penny, and now Kenneth Walker in their backfield, and other guys as well. But those are all decent backs that if they are in the right system and have the proper offensive line in front of them could do some damage. But that hasn't been the case, mostly because they haven't been able to stay healthy. They have
but now you also don't have the threat of Russell Wilson back there.
Right, so people are gonna tee off even more.
They couldn't run the ball when they had a Pro Bowl level quarterback.
I mean, they still have Lockett and Metcalf at receiver, but you don't feel like you have a guy that can get them the ball now. So I feel like one or both of them could be the next guys out the door, especially if this season go downhill quickly before the trade deadline. You could see them fire sailing a few of these guys, and I think Lockett and Metcalf make the most sense for teams that are looking to add to their passing attack.
Right, I agree.
I think probably
they're probably going to have to pay DK soon, too.
Right, and I think that's another reason they want to get rid of him. He's not going to be in their plans when they're good again. Like, he's a luxury that they can't afford to have. We already talked about they got rid of Bobby Wagner, so there's not a lot left at linebacker. Jordan Brooks is the one that stands out. They traded for Jamal Adams. He wanted out of New York so badly, and he went to Seattle, probably thought it would be better there, and this year it may be worse than it would have been if he stayed in New York. So
yeah, now in part New York was able to rebuild a lot this year because of the Jamal Adams trade.
Sure, but yeah, there's just I don't feel like there's a lot of hope in Seattle.
And I don't mean this as a Miami fan, but I just mean truly, like, when was the last time you could say that the Jets' future may look brighter than the Seattle future, at least short term? Like
probably 10, 12 years ago, maybe 12, 15 years ago. Like, it's been a while for sure.
Right. And again, not me being facetious. Like, honestly, like, how do you not look at the Jets and be like, hey, at least you would think they appear to be headed in the right direction, even though they're still at the bottom.
Right.
They're facing the right direction. They know which way to go now. Who knows if they'll be able to go that way. But like the Seahawks, I feel like they're just starting their whole reset. They're just starting it. So
and they got a rough start to the year. They they host Denver to start the first one of the first Monday night games is Denver Seattle, which is very juicy for headlines and stories. Then they have to go to San Francisco. So first 2 weeks not kind to Seattle. Their bye is mid-season right after their trip November 13th to Germany to play the Buccaneers. But yeah, obviously you can tell Justin and I are both down on Seattle, and this brings us to the end of the NFC West, which is good because we only have like 15 minutes left, and we haven't even started the AFC. So Justin, NFC West, who do you have in fourth? I think we're gonna both agree here though. Who do you have in fourth, and what's their record?
I'm putting Seattle there. I'm gonna put them at 4 or 5 wins. I'll put them at 5-12.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking too. Seattle, fourth place, 5-12, which is obviously a reduction from their record last year, which was 7-10. So Seattle, sorry, fourth place. I think 4 or 5 wins is right where I have them. I just don't see a lot of positives coming out of the Pacific Northwest. All right, now it starts to get interesting. Justin, who do you have in third in the NFC West?
I'm going Arizona, and I'm gonna go 7-10.
I'm going Arizona, and I'm going 7-10. So we're right on the same page. So Seattle fourth, Arizona third. I'll go second. My second place team, and we're already in that trap of duplicating things from last year. At least I am. I'm going San Francisco in second place, and I'm going to say that they finished the same as last year at 10-7.
Okay. I'm going San Francisco, but I'm going to go 9-8. I
Okay.
think there's going to be a few hiccups.
I
because
contemplated dropping them a game, but I was like, no, I think they can get to 10. So
I figure I know it's not true rookie quarterback, but I feel first year quarterback, there's going to be a game in there that they lose that maybe there were some mistakes that he doesn't make next year, meaning the 2023
Sure, that's
season.
fair. That's fair. And then the Rams, they were 12-5 last year, division champs, defending Super Bowl champs. We both have them winning. I'm going to actually have them taking a step back, though, because I think the schedule's super tough. Not that they're not a good team, and not that I don't think that they're in contention to win the Super Bowl, but I'm going to have the Rams finish 11-6.
That's where I'm putting them, 11-6. I think, like we talked about, it's so hard, but I think they're still going to be in the playoffs, and they're going to be up there. But I just think it's so hard, and some of it comes down to that luck factor, and some of it comes down to that sense of urgency. You get that team that they know, if we make the playoffs, we can win. So I'm going to put them at 11-6.
So
we match.
Yes, we are 1 through 4 in the NFC West. We're exactly the same. So in terms of betting lines, the Rams have anywhere from like the 3rd to 6th best odds to win the Super Bowl, repeat as champions. They're tied for 3rd on DraftKings at plus 1,000. I'm just looking at a few of the other sites on here. Looks like they're 4th on FanDuel at plus 1,100. We need Paul here to go over all this stuff. But 49ers are the next closest NFC West team, followed by the Cardinals, and then way down at the bottom are the Seahawks. The Seahawks are only in front of the Jaguars, Lions, Jets, Falcons, and Texans. It's been a long time you can group the Seahawks in with some of those teams who are perennial bottom dwellers, at least over the last 10 or 12 years. Maybe not the Falcons, but the Lions, Jets, and Texans are certainly in that group, and now Seattle is right there with them. So we're in line with the sports books, but let's take a look at the AFC West quickly now. We're probably not going to be able to go as in depth with them as we had wanted to, but that's what happens. We should have 8 or 9 shows to do our NFL preview, but just time will not allow. But again, alphabetically or alphanumerically by mascot means we're going to Denver. So Coach Steve O'Neill, I know you're watching or listening after the fact. We get to talk about your Denver Broncos here. And they made huge splashes in the offseason. We already mentioned it in talking about Seattle, but Russell Wilson heading to Denver, playing at Mile High this year. He wanted out. He got his wish. And Denver, they were 7-10 last year, had a great defense, inconsistent offense. They got their quarterback, much like they did a few years ago, a lot of years back now, when Peyton Manning came to town, and they immediately made them a better team, made the Super Bowl twice in 3 years, winning one, ending the Super Bowl 50 with Manning on top. Broncos haven't been the same since, though. But now that they have Russell Wilson back, I know the expectations are sky high in Denver. So what else has happened? What else has changed for them. I'm trying to see if any other major changes impact them other than the trade for Russell Wilson. Obviously, that's the big thing.
Had a coaching change.
Right. Yes. Yes, they did. So
They brought in the coordinator from
right,
Packers,
Nathaniel
correct?
Hackett is the new head coach. They had to make that change because Vic Fangio just was not good. He was 19-30 in his 3 seasons and just wasn't able to get them anywhere. Was not able to move anywhere. Nathaniel Hackett is an interesting guy, coming from Green Bay.
Fangio was like the Drew Luck of head coaches.
Yeah, exactly. And they know all about that all too well. So their draft, again, they didn't have early round picks because of the Russell Wilson trade. They didn't pick until 64, but I know draft evaluators were excited about Nick Bonito, the linebacker, the rusher from Oklahoma that they got in the second round. That was a good early pick for them, adding to that defense, though. But I don't think that they really necessarily needed too much to add to the offense. Despite it being the worst unit, they have a lot of guys that still have a lot of potential. Now, they traded Noah Fant, the tight end, to Seattle in the Russell Wilson trade, but they have so many young, talented players on offense. They brought back Melvin Gordon to pair with Javonte Williams entering his second year. And then at wide receiver, KJ Hamler's coming off of an ACL injury. He seems to be ahead of schedule and ready to go. Jerry Jeudy entering his third year, possible off the field things going on with him. Hopefully that those are rectified and taken care of, but you got to keep an eye on that. Tim Patrick and Cortland Sutton, I believe, were both signed to extensions in the last year or so. So there's a healthy amount of talent at wide receiver. Someone's got to step up at tight end now, but they do have Albert O, who I think is entering his third year in the system. And they've made investments into the offensive line, which we know was an issue for Russell Wilson when he was in Seattle. But I already mentioned their defense was really good last year, but it flew under the radar because their offense was so pathetic at times, and it mostly came down to the quarterback play.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. This team, they've got weapons on the offensive side. I know they sent Noah Fant, but I don't know that there's much more Russell Wilson could ask for. An offensive-minded coach. You still have lots of weapons, like deep number of weapons too at wide receiver. Like you said, some things to sort through there, but it seems like that's starting already to happen. And the defense is really good in part because they hit it out of the park with their first round pick last year. And Patrick Surtain, is it the second or is he junior? I think it's second.
I think it's 2. Yeah, the second.
But I've given Drew Lock the benefit of the doubt the last couple of years. I kept thinking he was going to turn the corner.
Yeah, you did. You were a luck guy.
Yeah, that's my heart speaking to. I want Denver to be good, but it just didn't happen. It's going to be interesting because I think they are very good. They have the potential to be very good. That division is brutal. It
is.
There isn't, at least in the NFC West, there's one team that we talked about that underachieves in the Cardinals, at least in our eyes. And there's a team that is just flat out probably going to be bad, the Seahawks. That's not happening in the AFC West.
No.
At least by expectations. So it's going to be brutal, but man, there's going to be some fun games in that division too. So,
yeah, I'm very much looking forward to the AFC West this year for sure.
Yeah, and the Broncos being in the mix of it just makes it all the more exciting. It's all the more meaningful football games there are, and by meaningful I mean for playoff implications, not just draft pick status. It is great, and man, it'll be exciting. It should be exciting.
I know they've won 3 Super Bowls in their current look, but I do want to see those throwbacks come back because those like original John Elway threads, those are I miss those. I know they tried to do something even with the one helmet rule where they just put the the horse jumping through the D on the Navy helmets, but I need the lighter blue back. But yeah,
I'm
so
like I'm kind of like take it or leave it on the old ones.
I'm not
And
saying they need to change full time. I just want to see it a few
Right.
times a year.
So that would be cool. It would be cool to see it a few times, but it's got to be. I want to see it in another. Well, probably in one of their AFC West matchups. So like, I know
Yeah,
the Raiders.
yeah.
The Raiders can't really throw it back.
Not too much. No, there is just minor changes.
But like, the Chargers have some awesome options that we always talk about,
Mm-hmm.
and the Chiefs they don't.
They're
really
traditional.
Have to throw it back
Yeah, like
either,
they are the Chiefs. Yeah.
right. But like one of those, like getting a game like I don't know, a Thursday night game or a Sunday night game, Monday night or something where that is the uniform matchup. That would be clutch.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So they did add a few guys of note. Randy Gregory was the big one from the Cowboys. He was supposed to have a deal with Dallas in place, and then he decided that Denver's was a little bit better.
Randy Gregory.
DJ Jones from the 49ers, we talked about him moving to Denver when we talked about San Francisco. And Billy Turner, offensive lineman for the Packers, and the Kwan Williams, cornerback for the 49ers, and one of those unheralded 49ers defensive backs that no one knew about over the last few years, and now he was able to cash in and sign with Denver. So adding some defensive pieces to a Broncos defense that was already really good feels like it should signal a good year, a good turnaround. They were 7-10 last year. Justin and I will get to our predictions in a bit, but just a quick look at their schedule, and we know they start at Seattle and the big return of Russell Wilson on that one of those first Monday night games. But then week 2 they have Houston, so if they want to get off fast, they have that opportunity because they're playing 2 teams that we expect to be, I think, worse than Denver before they get to play the 49ers and Raiders.
Right. Those are games where if you want to be a playoff contender, especially in a loaded division, you have to win the games you're supposed to win. And I would say both those games are games they're supposed to win.
Right. They have to beat the Texans, Seahawks, Texans, Jets, Jaguars, Panthers. Those are most wins. Those ones I just said.
Those they have to win.
Yeah, they have to win those games. How many was that? Was that 5, 6?
Right.
Like those are must-win games. You cannot lose. If you lose one of those games, then you need to beat a team that you're a push with or even under against. So like right now, Raiders, Chargers, and I'm sure their fans think Chiefs are all pushes. That's 6 games right there. You might have to steal one of those if you lose to one of those other teams. But they also have to play the Titans and Colts. They have to play the Cardinals and Rams. So like they have a tough schedule because the Wests are crossing over, West versus West. It's going to make for great TV, but the teams are going to be beating themselves up. So the Broncos got to win those games, those easy games, those gimme games. They cannot fall. They need to take advantage if they want to make some noise.
They have to start hot. You have to start hot with that easy schedule the first couple weeks.
So Coach O'Neill, Steve is watching. He also mentions one of your Eagles, Alex Singleton, headed to Denver. And Steve told me before the show, before we even started tonight, he saw that what we were talking about, and he said he has his Broncos at 11-6. So that is a 4-game turnaround in a fan's eye. So Justin and I will give our predictions here in just a few minutes, but let's
just
move
real quick. It was a big weekend for some of his big guys.
It was, yeah. So, first of all, Steve, I hope your recovery is going well. I know you're getting ready to start some physical therapy, so we wish you the best of luck in your recovery from your surgery. And congratulations to your Why I'm Missing Spartans. The boys and girls both captured district championships, and the throwers are close to Steve's heart, and they did phenomenal. So and a lot of the Why I'm Missing football players in the track events did amazing too. So a great weekend to be a Spartan. So congratulations to Coach Steve O'Neill and the Why I'm Missing community. And you'll have to wait a few more minutes to hear what Justin and I have to say about the Denver Broncos in 2022. So the Chargers are up next. Love their uniforms. Great set of uniforms. Would look amazing against those Broncos throwbacks. I hope that we get treated to that in the next few years. But Los Angeles, I think, underperformed last year. Finished 9-8. They could have made the playoffs. They needed to beat the Raiders in the last game, and they weren't able to do it. So we're on to or tie, right? Yeah. We're on to year 2 of the Brandon Staley regime, but year 3 of Justin Herbert. I think expectations are for them to take a step forward. Again, tough when you're in a division with the Chiefs, who are always really good. Now the Broncos are better. I think a lot of people would say the Raiders are better. So there's a tough task in front of the Chargers in 2022. And what are they going to be able to do? Well, they were very active also this offseason. They were able to bring in, Khalil Mack. I couldn't think of his name. They brought in Khalil Mack to add to that defense, which was a huge move for them. That was kind of the start of like, wow, the AFC West is going to be ridiculous this year. They also signed J.C. Jackson, who was the big Patriots defensive back, who was made available surprisingly, and he decided to go to the Chargers. Huge pickup for them as a Penn State guy. Austin Johnson left the Giants to go to the Chargers. And Troy Reeder, the aforementioned Rams linebacker, one-time Penn Stater, also signed with the Chargers. And journeyman linebacker Kyle Van Noy, who's played in Detroit, New England twice, and Miami, he also made it out to Los Angeles as well. But the biggest one, obviously, is the Khalil Mack trade to add to that defense and have him opposite Bosa, depending on how they use Mack. A lot of potential there in defensive pass rush. Now, they did have a first-round pick. I feel like most of the teams we've been talking about haven't had first-round picks, but the Chargers did, and they picked one of my favorite guys, offensive lineman. Coach O'Neill and I both love the big bodies in the trenches, and Zion Johnson from Boston College was one of the guys that I was really interested in the draft, and the Chargers ended up getting him, and I don't think you can fault a team with a young, talented quarterback trying to protect him. I mean, just look at what happened to the Bengals and Joe Burrow. They've spent all offseason trying to protect Burrow, because if they protected him a little bit better, they'd be Super Bowl champions right now. I don't think that's much of a stretch at all. But yeah, so Zion Johnson was their big pick. They also were able to get Isaiah Spiller from Texas A&M, the running back in the 4th round. And I feel like this is a team, Justin, that every year gives me fits, because I want them to be better than they are. For a long time it happened because I was a big LaDainian Tomlinson guy.
Broncos.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, but Justin Herbert isn't Drew Lock, so there's something else going on there.
You got me there.
This was before, like, because I was always, I don't want to say I was like a huge Phillip Rivers fan, but I did defend him more often because I know you weren't a Phillip Rivers guy.
Oh, much more than I was. Yes.
But I was a huge LaDainian Tomlinson fan, and I know this is going back now like 15 years or so, but I've always loved the Chargers uniforms, so that always gets me too. I have a much more affinity for them than maybe I should, but it just feels like I feel like this team should be good. Not necessarily like Super Bowl favorites good, but I feel like they should be good. When you have Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack playing opposite each other, I feel like they should be able to be better defensively. Now, have they done enough in the defensive backfield to compensate? I mean, adding J.C. Jackson, I feel like can't hurt, and now you're another year into the Asante Samuel Jr. Time, and I always liked Nasir Adderley and Derwin James. He was healthy last year, finally. I don't know. They signed Mike Williams. They still have Keenan Allen. They're adding Isaiah Spiller to Austin Eckler and Joshua Kelly. Justin Herbert seems to be pretty good. I feel like they underachieved last year. At 9-8, I expected them to win, 10 or 11 games, and they just couldn't quite get there. They were close. They play in such a tough division, and they got to play the NFC West. I know I shouldn't be talking where they're going to finish right now because we're not doing records. But I'm just having a tough time of where I want to slot the Chargers because I feel like they should be better than they were recently, and I feel like they could be a trap for me again this year. But where are you with the Chargers?
Yeah, I'm kind of in a spot where I feel like they should be really good, but some of the things that kept them from winning games that they should last year is kind of frustrating. Like you thought they were over the whole you thought they were over the whole like finding ways to lose thing, but then they apparently weren't. It's hard to do. And in such a tough division, like it's really, they're in a tough spot. Similar to what we were talking about with the Broncos, like there's no easy divisional games, and you have a bunch of tough crossover games. It's tough though, because I feel like with this team and the pieces they've added, if Staley doesn't make the playoffs, if the Chargers don't make the playoffs, I could see them getting rid of him. And I don't necessarily agree with that. But at the same time, I also understand, like, where else is this team to go if not into the playoffs? They were seconds away from it this past season. And you have a great quarterback that's still on his rookie deal. Like, anything short of the playoffs is a step back. So I don't necessarily agree. You and I preach stability all the time. And I know this may be a little counterintuitive because we started off with the Niners, then we went to Arizona, and I was ripping Cliff Kingsbury. But I feel like a decade worth of results is in college and pros is a little bit of a trend there. The only other aspect to it, with it being, I know it's not San Diego, but with it being the Chargers, maybe there isn't the same pressure there. But like if they get passed by the Broncos,
yeah,
right. So even, I don't know, like, but or what if it's a tough division? What if they finish fourth? Like,
I know,
with not a bad record, but like the fourth out of the division, they don't do well in their divisional games or something. Like, you got to move on, right? Like, I don't know, like, but there's going to be a lot of tough questions if they're not in the playoffs,
right?
And you still got the young guy, and I think a lot of it would come down to maybe his relationship with Staley, and I can't speak to that obviously, but you would think if they're in a position where they're not making the playoffs, there's going to be some frustration starting to boil over, and I think you'll start to hear some dissension in the other LA team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of it's this is a bit out there, but I think some of it has to do with how the Rams do. Because if the Rams have continued success this year, they share a stadium. That's got to be old. You see this team that went out and pieced together all these things. And if you're the Chargers, you got to be like, well, we've got a quarterback who's good. We've got weapons. We've got defensive talent.
Yeah.
We poached our coach from the, you got to start to think like there's going to be some frustration there. And the Chargers ownership has to make some odd decisions at times over the years. So trying to predict what they're going to do, good luck with that. But
right. So
I think anything short of the playoffs is a failure for this team.
I agree, but unfortunately, I do need to cut this short. I hate to do that because we have two teams left to go, but I want to quickly run through records. So my fourth team, I think, and this could change by the next time we do this, and maybe we can talk more in depth. I think I'm going to put the Raiders in last at 9-8.
Okay.
My third team is going to be the Chargers at 10-7, one game better. Next, I am going to have Denver. I don't know that I was ready to go the full Steve O'Neill 11-6. So I think I'm going to give them the tiebreaker over the Chargers at 10-7. And I will still have the Chiefs up top, but I don't think it's going to be by much. I think they're going to be fighting throughout the year to get to 11-6, win the division again. But the division has gotten better, and I think the crossover with the NFC West is tough for this division. So I think that's how I see it. So how do your 4 go?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with. I'm gonna go with the Raiders in last. I think they're just hurting from some missed first-round picks the last couple years. I'm gonna put them at 8 wins. I'm gonna go Chargers next at 9 wins. Again, I think there's gonna be some tough questions that have to happen there, but I need to see them do it, and I think they're capable. I just need to see them do it. I'm gonna go with the Broncos in second place at 10 wins, like you did. I think they're better. I think it's just a brutal schedule in just part of it being in the AFC West. And then I'm gonna go with the Chiefs at 11 wins and duking it out in that just brutal conference or in the brutal division. So that's kind of where I'm at.
All right. Well, sorry we ran out of time. We'll try to get something up there about the Raiders and Chiefs so that we can fulfill that. Maybe we can tack it on to the next show that we do this. But again, they're going to be hit or miss. We'll make sure we get it up there, and we'll put up some graphics to talk about where we have them fitting. So my dad also, he hasn't said anything about the AFC West, but in the NFC West, he had the same 4 that we did. So.
And I'm sure we'll hear from Rich from New England too.
Oh, I'm sure he's writing all these down. So Justin, thanks for joining me and being able to do the show tonight. Sorry we missed the last 2 weeks, and sorry got to cut it short here this evening. But I think that's it. I got to get going. So for everyone, this was episode 359 of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. We will be back again in 2 weeks. 3 weeks. Again, on the 2-week gap, we won't be here the 29th or the 5th, but we'll be back June 12th for episode 360, where we will do the NFL South divisions. So for Justin Raffoff, I'm Joe Mays. This was the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. We'll see you again in a few weeks.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show, brought to you by Mays Sandwich Shop. Woo-hoo! You can watch each weekly episode live on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play. You can also rate and review us on many of these platforms as well. We'd love to hear from you. Send your emails to the Mays Sandwich Shop inbox at joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. The Joe Mays and J-Raff Show is a part of the JMNJR Radio Network, home to other productions such as The Bulldog Hour, Tangents with Friends, and Nat Chats with Dad. Until next time.